Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Is it Luchana? Luchana, is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So a warm welcome here in Nothing Conversation, John. Thank you for your time.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, how shall I start? Well, I basically research a website to Joy Lot. I guess you know him.
Yes,
Joy
yes.
Lot.
I was just corresponding with him today, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
A friend of mine suggests me to research or to see. So I start reading there, and I saw your name, and I was curious. Yeah. And then I make another research, and it leads me to Amazon. And then I found some of your books.
Yes.
I just opened maybe An Instant Freedom. Yeah, I opened this one. So the Amazon, they suggest this opportunity just to look something.
Right.
And it was an instant, an immediate, you could say, resonance. I don't know, something like. So I follow this impulse, and I just sent you an email, and and here we are.
And here we are.
So can you share something about the story behind the name John?
What do you mean?
I mean, I don't know, what draws you to non-duality, you could say, or has John ever been a seeker?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I have a I have a different appreciation for the word seeker. Seeking is ongoing, and to me, seeking means learning, and seeking means openness. And so, yes, I was a seeker. I am a seeker. I haven't graduated from seekerness, and I expect this to be a lifelong occupation. Whatever that means.
Yeah.
But I just read a ton of stuff, like, several of your guests, they talk about all the books they read and so on. And I'm sure I've read most of what some of these other folks have read. And I started jotting down sort of little epigrams and aphorisms, and sometimes I call them subversions. And one thing followed another, and I ended up publishing a book through Non-Duality Press, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They're now, I think, a part of Harbinger Press. But anyway, they picked up a little book called A Tether Tied to Space. And it's a book. It has like a beginning essay and an ending essay, and in the middle is a whole bunch of my usual short bits of gibberish. And but up until that point, I was just all over the map, studying all kinds of stuff. If you want to hear this, do you want me to tell you about this?
Yeah,
I don't know if
just share what is. Yeah, sure.
I assume that was an open-ended question, so I'm gonna babble on for a minute. But aside from just being sort of a weird kid with a strange imagination, when I was 17, I stumbled across, let's say, 3 different writers or speakers or teachers at the same time. Alan Watts was one, Jiddu Krishnamurti was one, and I think at the same time I was reading the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, and sort of by extension Chuang Tzu's work. who's a little bit more of a comedian. And I took a class at one point. I was always writing poetry. I was taking a poetry class, and our assignment was to write a work that's modeled on some work that you admire. And so I wrote. This is funny to think about now. I wrote a sequence of what else but epigrams, aphorisms, subversions, very short bits that were based on the translation I was reading of the Tao Te Ching. And it was very loosely based on that. I mean, the format was there, but otherwise it was my quasi-mystical adolescent brain trying to process, what I was reading and what I was experiencing. And so just reading a ton of stuff, Alan Watts, I read, I think he's got a book called Doing Nothing, unless I'm confusing that with this other guy. Sitting Quietly Doing Nothing, I think, is that book. And fast forward, I was in the Navy for a while, and I was reading Alan Watts's autobiography. And then I read more about Alan Watts, and I learned that he basically drank himself to death. So I thought, well, that's great. I'll do that too. Not the to death part, but so I was always sort of half serious, but also, for a long period, let's just call it partying. Before the Navy, in the Navy, after the Navy, not so much after the Navy. My now wife wouldn't go along with that sort of thing. But just a lot of reading and meditating and trying different approaches to Buddhism. I was very interested in various Buddhist teachers, especially one, Huangpo. Huangpo was my favorite. And he's got a quote. In the armory of the sovereign, there is no sword of thusness. And I thought, oh, in other words, you can't say there it is. You don't pull this sword out and say, thus.
This is it.
That's how I interpreted it. It probably meant something completely different, but at the time I thought, well, but I would read Bankei, who talked about how people exchange their unborn Buddha mind for thoughts. And I thought, wow. And these things sort of hit you at different times. And then I was working in a library, and I ran across a book about Shinran. And this isn't Zen Buddhism, this is Shin Buddhism. And what I liked about Shinran, by the way, all the while I'm reading these things, I'm also reading 1,000 other things, from just crazy nonsense to Western philosophy, to fiction, whatever. But anyway, so I discovered Shinran. And what I liked about, let me back up a second, because I'll tell you where I first heard about Shin Buddhism. And this is funny because Joey Lott and I were exchanging some emails recently, and one of the subjects that came up was this guru. He used to be called Franklin Jones, then he was Da Frijan, and then he was Da Avabasa, and then I think he ended up as Adi Da. Have you ever heard of this guy?
Yes, but I don't know anything. I have heard only the name a few times, just mentioned from here and there. But
it's really a wild and crazy guy. I think he died at age 69, I think, but he was but he had this system of categorizing material to read and study. And I think he had 7 different levels. And essentially he was saying, dip in at whatever level you want to dip into. there's wisdom in all of this, but it goes from lower to higher. And so on the low end was all kinds of stuff, but including, for example, the Marquis de Sade. So again, I thought, well, that's cool. Let me read the Marquis de Sade. You can only do that for so long, but anyway, there were a lot of other different levels. And of course, the 7th level included Wangpo, who I mentioned. And I thought, well, that's exactly where Wangpo belongs. Just a radically non-dual Zen teacher, Wangpo. It's all, you put Wangpo with Lin Chi and pretty close to Bankei in some ways. These are just unbelievably important Zen or Chan teachers. So anyway, at the 7th level was Wangpo, but also a couple of books that I'm standing very close to right now, the Ashtavakra Samhita and the Avadhuta Gita. Are you familiar with those texts?
Yes. With Ashtavakra. With Ashtavakra mainly.
Right.
Yeah.
So at Advaita Vedanta books, and I thought, oh my gosh, these definitely belong on level 7. Of course, Dafrijan put himself on level 7 also. How else would he be wise enough to categorize all these other teachers? And I don't want to make fun of him too much, because I was very, very interested in him. And at one point, excuse me, I even went to see him, which is not something that I would normally be inclined to do. But there was a big group, at his ashram in Northern California. I went, and there was a big group there, and it was really one of the strangest things I've ever encountered, but it was quite fascinating. But the people were wearing little pendants around their necks, little bottles that had water in them. And the water was from the foot bath of Dafrijan or Avabasa. So they bathed his feet in this water, and then they would put the water in the pendants, and they would wear the pendants around their necks. Wow. So I thought, well, I'm gonna pass on that, but I was very fascinated by this guy, because he wrote, oh my gosh, he wrote a book that at least the earlier edition was called The Knee of Listening. And it had some really great stuff in it. Very, he talked about see, understand, transcend, sort of in that order. See, understand, transcend. It's like you see, maybe you see your dualizing mind in action. You understand it. And thereby, these are my terms now, you transcend it. And he also had a catchphrase where you would ask yourself the two-word question: avoiding relationship. And that's a way to, as you're interacting with people, am I in a kind of contracted state? Am I really kind of avoiding even like a conversational relationship with the person in front of me? Probably. Yeah, probably. I'm probably, protecting myself. I'm maybe trying to think of something to say that will elevate myself. All these things are happening at the same time, which is kind of an avoidance of relationship. So I thought it was fascinating. And he wrote a book called, that was right up my alley title-wise. It said, it was called The Dreaded Gambu. Something about the disease that the imaginary disease that religion seeks to cure. The dreaded Gambu, the imaginary disease that religion seeks to cure. And later on, by the way, he I don't advocate for him. I'm just telling you my own history with him.
Sure.
And he wrote he announced that he was starting a thing called a 4th jhana in Buddhism. Now, to me, it seems like there was already a 4th jhana, maybe in Vajrayana, but I'm no expert at this, so I'm going to say stuff that's way past my actual knowledge. But I'll fake it. But there was the there was what's called Hinayana. You know, if you're in Hinayana, you don't call it Hinayana, you call it something else like Theravada. I'm sure you know. And then there's Mahayana. Oh no, I guess it was a fourth. And then Vajrayana. And then he was saying what we're starting is called Advaita Yana. So there was a combination of Buddhism, you might say, and Advaita, you know, out of the Hindu tradition. So, you know, he had interesting experimental ideas, and I think he was an extremely intelligent person. But also, I think it's a dangerous combination when you find, what you often find with folks like this, when you combine high intelligence with high charisma. You know, you hardly ever get lucky that you know, enough for that to work out in my opinion. You know, it's just, it gets so anyway, I thought that combination with him didn't really work out that well, and so on. So I'm sorry, because I can go off on long tangents, and I probably shouldn't do that because we're not going to talk that long, but I did want to talk about Shin Buddhism. And the first time I heard of something related to Shin Buddhism was from a list, that's 7 levels of material to study that Dafrijan talked about. And it was a mention of a guy named Ippen, Ippen. And he was a guy that walked around. Later on, a person in Shin Buddhism, or a person really in Shin Buddhism, said, well, Ippen, he was like a Hare Krishna, where they sort of dance on the street corner and, you know, sing songs and say stuff. But Ippen, and in Shin Buddhism, there's a phrase, Namo Amida Buddha, or Namu Amida Butsu. That's the key phrase. It's not it's not supposed to be a mantra. It's like the essence of the teaching. You don't repeat it. Well, depends on what sort of branch you're in. You shouldn't be repeating it as a mantra to gain something for yourself. It's just, but it summarizes a profound truth. Well, Ippen, I discovered through Dafrijan, thought the only thing you need in this world in terms of enlightenment, salvation, whatever you want to call it, is to just hear or even see that word, or that statement once. So if you are exposed to Namo Amida Buddha in some form, that is your ticket to perfection. Just to the end of, forget about everything else. You're done. And so they would go around, he and his group would go around, and they would pass out, I believe, small pieces of paper with that phrase on it. And they would hand it to people. And I thought, that is the most elegant, simplest, possibly idiotic, but fantastically wonderful idea. I could stand on a street corner and hand people pieces of this paper, and that's it. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, of course it's it, because what he's really saying is, you're done. You're already done. You know, this is a silly way of explaining that you didn't even need this piece of paper. It has occurred. You are in the Pure Land. Shinshu is connected to the Pure Land tradition. You're there. And so I thought, well, that is so fantastic. But anyway, that's where I heard about Shin Buddhism. Then back to me working in a library and coming across a book about Shinran, where he was described as this person who well, he studied on Mount Hiei in Japan for 20 years or so, and that's where all the big shot Buddhists studied. And of course, it was all men. But to my knowledge, it was all men. I better not say stuff that I'm not sure about. But he was associated with a guy named Honen, and anyway, they were despised by the more traditional Buddhists on Mount Hiei, and they thought that what Honen was teaching wasn't even Buddhism at all. And they ended up, once there was an exchange of powerful people politically, because they depended on what happened on the political level as to whether or not they were allowed to exist or get money or have a preferred position. Well, once the person that was sort of a supporter of theirs died, well, they got chased out of town, and some of them got executed.
Mm.
Now Shinran was what do you call it? Exiled, and he started, and he basically stopped being a monk.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was fascinated by Shinran because he stopped being a monk, technically speaking, even though he once in a while, because he had a nickname for himself, Gutoku Shinran, which means basically bald-headed fool. Bald-headed fool. And so he intermixed with the lowest of the low, as they called it, the social strata, and the part of Japan that he was exiled to. And the fishermen, the farmers, maybe merchants too, craftspeople. These are all extraordinarily valuable people who at the time were considered low lives. It was only the aristocracy that really mattered, I guess. Anyway, he found his life among them, and he stopped being a monk to the extent that he got married. He had a bunch of kids, and I thought, well, this is my kind of person, is a person that leaves the establishment and leads an ordinary life, makes fun of himself, and really finds his home among these uneducated people with no status. And so here's, what happened was, here is Shinran Shonin, who revolutionized Mahayana Buddhism. Even at least one famous Zen guy, D.T. Suzuki, considered Shin Buddhism to be the apex of the climax of Mahayana. Now it's kind of stupid to say stuff like that, but if you just accept it as a statement about how important what Shinran discovered was, then you get it. So people don't know much about Shin Buddhism. They know a lot about, they read a lot about Zen Buddhism and so on. And now more and more Dzogchen, which I've also read quite a bit about, and I love it, some of it, radical Dzogchen. Mm-hmm. But Shinran, really, he turned, in a sense, he turned Buddhism upside down. And if we get time to talk about any of that, we will, because it's so different from what people normally think of when they think of Buddhism. It's not a meditative Buddhism. As a matter of fact, there's no actual practice associated with Shin Buddhism, other than if you might say, maybe you know about it, but it's other than listening to the Dharma and self-examination is basically what Shin Buddhism is all about. So what does it mean, listen to the Dharma? It means we listen to. It's good to listen to Buddhas wherever you find them. And what is a Buddha? A Buddha is an awakened person. Now, what does it mean to be awakened? Well, in Shin, the explanation is this: you're not, and these are my words, so you have to take everything I say with a huge grain of salt. And it's probably all wrong, but I do my best. So in Shin Buddhism, awakening means you awaken to your ignorance. So it's not an awakening to the great oneness. It's not an experience, a direct, flash experience of the great infinite oneness, over all one and that sort of thing. No, that is true about all reality, but it's not really possible with this mechanism to absorb that, I would say. But what I can do is there's this thing called in Shin Buddhism called the twofold awakening. The twofold awakening. The first awakening of the twofold awakening is waking up to my own really doomed ignorance. Just my ignorance, my, you know, this dualistic mind, these blind passions, this conniving mind, this corrupt mind, you know, this face with a smile on it that really, I'm really not a good person. You know, I mean, I'm always looking for what's in it for me personally. And if there's some angle I can work, I'll work it. And that is true, not partially. It's not like I'm partially selfish and partially not selfish. No, there's a recognition that I'm selfish to the root, 100%. So I can't ever claim, well, but if you really knew my heart, you'd know that within me is a good person. That's not really the Shin perspective. The Shin perspective is one of the teachers in this tradition says that with Shakyamuni, the first word Shakyamuni said under the Bodhi tree when he woke up was, "Oh, ignorance, oh, ignorance." And that what he discovered about himself under the Bodhi tree was that he himself was the devil. Okay, so all of this might sound like extreme language, but you know, it's designed to be sort of shocking, like a slap in the face, you know. And he discovered under the Bodhi tree that he himself was the devil. Okay, so that's ignorance to the root. So in other words, a Buddha or an awakened one is someone who has awakened to their 100% ignorance. You know, they're just, but it's not, you know, again, it sounds dramatic, but it's really, it's more to say that that's what ordinary people are. And in Shin Buddhism, there's no becoming something other than an ordinary person. Is one point. Another point is about, we were talking about seeking, and I said seeking is like,
I would like to address as seeking.
It's openness. It's lifelong learning. And so in the Shin various teachings are, you learn from everybody. Learn from all these people who have awakened. We can of course also learn from people who have not awakened. You know, we're interacting with people, and we can learn so much about ourselves just by observing our own interaction with them and so on. But anyway, it's quite fascinating, and it's unconventional in the sense that it's not the usual way. People and I for me to say people this or people that is ridiculous. You know, for me to make global statements is stupid. So I'll probably do it anyway. But when I catch myself, but it seems to me that often there's this idea that people are going to awaken to this non-dual reality and directly, and after that point everything is fine, or everything is somehow different, and you graduate. And instead what appeals to me, and this isn't just in Shin Buddhism, you also find it in in Zen and Dogen's Zen, which is very similar in some of its insights. But the awakening happens always in the eternal now. It's a here and now awakening. So I could never be one of these people that sits at the front of the room and tells people how to get from where they are to where I am. because first of all, they don't want to be where I am. I have a really twisted mind. You know, I'm sure I've got emotional issues. You know, I'm a totally unintegrated personality. There's nothing, if you could see behind my face or even on my face, there's nothing admirable in this person, other than maybe the fact that I'm at least willing to confess that on occasion to somebody who's stuck listening to this like you are right now.
Oh.
That's my rant for a minute. That's a long answer to, I think you asked a question.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I just wanted to bring you back to your writings. Yeah. How can this come up? I don't know. I would like to read something. Really, I prepare.
Go ahead.
Prepare something
Go ahead.
here because it.
That won't be embarrassing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it struck me very. I just laughed loudly. So this is from the first book, Instant Freedom. What was the Instant Freedom is the myths. No, it's the unbound myths of existence. This is
yes
from there.
Yes.
So you are home with capital letters, but you keep typing your address into the map app. For fuck's sake, look up.
Right. Well, that's right. And I think
this is radical.
That's in the last one that I put out. I hope I didn't put it out twice. I don't think there's a book called Instant Freedom is the Unbound Mist of Existence. But the more recent one is called Inverted Mind. And I think that quote is in that one. Unless I'm confused, but yes, that's, and you know, who knows? I might have. It was
the first one you have sent me, I guess. It was the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, Inverted Minds. True. Yeah.
Inverted Mind. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're.
So we are home. We are home. I am home, and I'm typing the address all the time.
Yes, and then I say.
Yeah, look up. It is one looking is enough, really.
Yeah, you're home, but you keep typing your home address into the map app. But for fuck's sake, look up. You know, you're home, and that I'll tell you what, that business about looking up is the most important thing to me. It means, maybe it means something on a couple of different levels, but really it means something extremely superficial. And because I'm sort of an anti-depth person anyway. You know, another thing I wrote in one of those books is, you know, quit the depth cult. You know, this business, if we think about depth, then we're really thinking about getting lost in conceptual mind. And I mean, it's necessary to sometimes get lost in conceptual mind, except when we're talking about this most important subject.
Yeah.
But so yeah,
no way to speak about it without using concepts. So
you have to. You absolutely have to.
True.
I mean, all language is reifying. It's not like you can say, well, here I have a new vocabulary that will allow me to express the non-dual reality without any reification whatsoever.
Yeah, there is a joke. A friend was joking that there is a non-dual police which is outside.
Yes.
Looking your words and writing.
Well, no, that's true in a sense, because
it's funny.
if you and people trip all over their own tongues and their own brains, trying to use weird language instead of just ordinary language. We all know that, this isn't the gospel. You don't have to record this. This isn't, some I'm not laying it down. I'm not carving. This isn't being carved into a stone or under a lizard's belly or in the clouds. It's we're having this exchange, which is so important to me. If I just diverge for a second, and when you think about it, first of all, when we have our little discussions here, once in a while, I'll try to just remind people to, philosophically, you've got a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. And it's all in a dialectical kind of spiral. It's not in a circle, it's a spiral. And so, and together we're having a dialectical conversation. And the point isn't to fixate on the best words necessarily. The point is to look beyond the words. Yeah. It's to look at the space on the other side of these words. So if I'm sitting here really, practically strangled conceptually, trying to come up with some phrases that will be correct, that won't be criticizable, then that's not going to flow very well, because first of all, it's impossible. So, but I wanted to get back to the little epigram that you're talking about, and you laughed about it, which I appreciated.
Yeah,
you're already home, and so I'm home, and I keep punching. This is that kind of seeking that you were talking about. Maybe
exactly.
that people seek.
Exactly.
And that's the kind of seeking that is pointed to there. But what's funny is, while I'm going to flash back to while I was working in a library, and I was reading Da Frijan, as a matter of fact, and that book, The Dreaded Gambu, and other things, and I never really gave him any credit for this or attributed anything to him for this, because later on I started to think that he was just kind of a psycho. But I did have this weird experience while working at the library. I was probably in my late 20s, and there was this moment, which was longer than a moment, or it was a continuing moment. Maybe it was whatever. But there was all of a sudden this situation where there was no problem. There was absolutely no problem. Now I was and still am, I'm sure, kind of a neurotic person, just nervous about all kinds of stuff. And at the time, and I was working in the library, and sometimes it was very difficult for me to interact with some people. Certain people scared me for no obvious reason. I get real nervous. But anyway, and I was sitting there, and I was at the card catalog. They used to have card catalogs in libraries, and I was just going through, working all by myself. And all of a sudden, I was sitting in this, let's call it a realm of no problem, just no problem. And that was very bizarre for me, because I was like just riddled with problems. I mean, I was just, I would put on a brave face, but I was just really uncomfortable all the time. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is, and also it had, there was a phrase that came to me, like, what if? So those two words, what if? And I thought, what if this is it and it's already here? What if this is it and it's already here? What if I don't need to resolve things, with my nervous mind? what if this this place that these teachers seem to be describing is right here, is this? And it's not like I was asking that question. It was more like the question was being offered to me. You know, it was like I was it was almost like, instead of looking at the no problem space, the no problem space was looking at me, and it was saying, what if? And so that was just so unbelievably wonderful in a very, very, very low-key way. It was like, it wasn't even in a key that you would normally consider a key. It was just something, it was just like, well, here. It's like, here. And I thought to myself, well, first of all, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, ever. This is probably the best thing that's ever going to happen to me for the rest of my life. And I'm quite sure that I'm going to think my way out of it. And so probably all three of those things were true. But the point of that was that no problem space, or that reality that it's like looking down is like looking at this device. Everybody's lost in their phone, right? And so these days, back then, not so much, but we're looking at the phone and we're lost in thought. We're lost in one link after another. And then, but what's going on outside of our attention to the phone? Well, I don't know, everything. Absolutely everything is going on, not just in that phone, but especially not in that phone. And so it's like, what's going on in my looking down at this device and looking things up on the internet, or responding to emails or texts or whatever, and ignoring what's going on. That is okay, because it simply doesn't matter. Because the field, the infinite field in which and as which this device, my attention to this device, my mind, are all happening in and as that exact same infinite field of, call it, light. There's no way out. So even though I worried that I was going to lose this unbelievable, subtle and peaceful realm of, call it, light, it never happened. It never left. It's always exactly as that moment was. Now, what happened to me is there's no encouragement of that. Absolutely. Well, as far as I could tell, nobody would, I'm talking to you because you're kind of in this business, but nobody really could possibly really absorb that, I thought. So, and also in my own self, I started to think, go off on my various tangents in my various lives. We have so many lives, so many interests, and so on, and so many happy things, sad things, blah, blah, blah. The whole life is going on, always diverted from that infinite context in which and as which we exist. And it never, ever left. Although I tried like hell through my thinking brain, not intentionally, but it happened. I thought, well, let me think about this. Let me think about that. Bankei said, exchanging the unborn Buddha mind for thoughts. Of course, I just would constantly do that. But in fact, it never left. And so for a while, I used to think, this is the short version, believe it or not, it never, I thought, other people don't see this, I must be special. And but later on, it occurred to me, and this is one of the most important theories or insights that I stumbled into for me, and that is everybody sees it. Everybody sees it, because to me, it's comparable to what I was describing with the looking down at the phone, and we're all caught up in what's on the phone, the smartphone, and so on. And absolutely everything else is going on at the same time. Absolutely everything else is going on at the same time. You see, I think that it's not because I'm special that I see this. I thought, no, that's ridiculous. Everybody sees this. They just don't acknowledge it. They've got it backwards. They think that, one way of looking at it is they think that's death, because there's not the usual sense of self out there. Everything, like, you are you, and Bulgaria is Bulgaria, and Arizona is Arizona, and I'm in this little room, but the infinite field, the endless field, in which and as which no boundary, we exist. We fear that because we think, oh my gosh, selflessness in that sense, narrow selflessness in that sense isn't there. Therefore, it's the death of me. And so I think that the way I see it, absolutely everybody sees what I see. They just don't acknowledge it as being primary. They're terrified of it. If they get it, maybe they're not terrified of it. They sort of block it out because the suggestion of that kind of vastness is it's worse than death. So to the ego mind, to the mind that's always striving, to the mind that's reading books, to the mind that's trying to achieve and ascend and accomplish. Wait a minute, now I'm doing all this stuff, and you're saying that this is narrower than narrower. This is a smaller than smaller speck. I'm not really saying that, but that's the way they perceive it, maybe in my imagination. And you're saying that this is, but this vastness, yeah, that in a sense is the true self, and the narrow, attention paying, I'm hung up on ideas about myself, and I'm hung up on this thing on the phone and that thing on the phone, and my identity, my name, my whatever, my career. That's nothing. I know you know this. But it's not nothing. I mean, it's something. I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to continue to do all this me stuff. But in fact, and this seems to me to be completely obvious, that boundaries, and I'm like the millionth person to make this observation, boundaries are false. There's no such thing as an actual boundary, which means there's no boundary between me and this so-called infinite field. If that's true, then the infinite field is myself. If you think about it, what a boundary is, it can't really be a boundary. Yeah. And I wrote a little bit about this once, and I don't know if anybody can understand it. I can barely understand it myself. But if you like, if there's B, I'm going to try it just with you for a second. If there's B for boundary, separating A from C, okay, then that B in between A and C is either part of A and C, or A or C, or it's not. Okay, so if B is not part of A or C, then there must be a boundary between the boundary and A and C. And then that goes on ad infinitum, because then the boundary between the boundary and between A and C must either be A or C, or it has a boundary. Anyway, it's kind of a goofy thing that sort of describes in barely logical terms what we can see probably just in the physicality of the present moment. This notion that I am somehow separate from this infinite field. Even my own, even my senses are extensive beyond this body mind. what is sensed is extensive beyond this body mind. You know, the infinite field is obviously extensive beyond my notion of what this body mind is. And there's absolutely no separation between me and that. So how is it that I'm terrified, if I were terrified of that, that appears to be selflessness, as in death, and this somehow is a self, as in life? Shit, that's a scary thing. That means I'm this narrow little thing, and I've got to protect myself with boundaries all the time. And it's really a fearful thing. Now, the good news is, to me, if whether or not you sort of see this vast field or not. Oh, real quickly, back to the twofold awakening. The twofold awakening is this. Awakening number one is waking up to my mistake about how I'm thinking that I am this narrow little self. And you know how fearful I was just saying I have to be, because I have to protect it. You know, survival is pretty important. But anyway, so I wake up to this mistake, this effortful self, this striving self, this desiring self, this self-protecting self. And I realized that, wait a minute, this contracting energy here now is suffering itself. This is suffering. I'm doing suffering. This is suffering. I'm imposing suffering on the present moment through this thing that I'm doing. That's the first awakening in the twofold awakening. Simultaneous with that is the recognition. If that's the case, then where is this happening? Well, it's happening in this infinite field that is my true self. You see, so if I see this, then simultaneously that means there is the field. And so but here's the punchline. Only the first of the twofold awakening is necessary, because the second part is none of my business. You don't do the second part. It's just that I become aware in the present moment of this what's called self-power in Shin Buddhism, this contraction of self-power, this greed and this fear in the present moment. And I realize I am this machine, this fear, greed machine. This is what I am as this small self. Now, when I see that, that's all I need to see, because what comes with it? It's like saying, here's an object, here's a black stone on a white table. Well, I'm going to focus on the black stone. Do I not somehow, am I unaware of the white table? No. The white table is there. Otherwise, I wouldn't see the black stone.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to try to shift focus between the stone and the table. All I need to do is see that little, that fist-like contracted energy, you know, that I'm doing, that thing that I'm performing unconsciously right now. And when I see it, I'm done. And I don't mean done as in I get the diploma, I've graduated. No.
Certificate.
That is the certificate. It's a lifelong, you know, Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Yeah.
He was asked, what's your definition of meditation? And he said, you have to see the faults as the faults. And that has to go on all the time. And that was such a relief when I read that, you know, at the time, because I thought this confirms that I don't get these people who have seen the faults as the faults once, and then they live this gliding, coasting, I don't know, ethereal kind of life, where they're convinced that they are no longer this and they are no longer that, and so on and so forth. Because I thought, well, that's not my experience, and that will never be my experience. You know, I am this neurotic bundle of, you know, self-pride and self-loathing and depression and
but,
all these things.
But there is something like I don't know. I'm not sure how exactly it's, but when it's seen, it cannot be unseen. So if there is an experience that this is so, I don't know, maybe.
Yes. That's
for each one is different. Yeah. There is
in Shin Buddhism, there's a phrase that's like that. And it doesn't nullify this point. The Shin Buddhist phrase is embraced, never to be abandoned.
Oh, beautiful.
And so that is, I think what I'm saying, and sometimes I'm critical of people that don't really exist. They only exist in my own mind. I've read something or watched them, and I create a fake version of them in my head, and then I argue with them. But I think that, let me then criticize the hypothetical imaginary person. In some cases, I'm sure they exist, where they say, I've had this experience. It was a one-time deal.
Oh yeah.
And now I'm done.
Everything goes smooth.
For me, the most beautiful thing about Shin Buddhism is that never happens. It's a here now. It's in the eternal now, the so-called eternal now, the timeless now, and it's actually enjoyed. It's a benefit to see the delusion, the contraction. There's an old Shin Buddhist. I mentioned it actually in the introduction to that latest little book I put out. His name was Saichi, and he has these imaginary conversations too. But he's a clog maker. He's long dead. This is like 100 years ago or something. But he would write down these little bits on the little shreds of material that were waste products from the clogs he was making. A poor guy, no money, but he was a working person. And he would write these little bits on these little bits. One of the things that he wrote was something like, there was a question. Of course, he wrote this whole thing, but the question is, Saichi, where do you find your pleasure? And Saichi answers, I find my pleasure in delusion, because delusion is, I'm going to kill this now, the gateway to this dharmic reality. So his entire life, his pleasure was delusion, because you wake up to this delusioning. I wake up to this delusioning that I'm doing again and again and again and again. Should I lament that? Should I be depressed about that? Should I go to a workshop where somebody can tell me how to get over that? No, not in Shin Buddhism, not in the sort of negative way, not at all. This is, it's kind of like the lotus thing being that lives in muck. If there's none of that muck, there's no lotus. And so it's recognized again and again and again as a great benefit. So I'm gonna get lost on a mental tangent. I'm gonna go off maybe on, I don't do this anymore, but road rage. I'm gonna just be convinced that my wife is totally wrong about something, and I'm totally right about something, and I'm gonna stew on that for a long time. Perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the benefit. Anyway, I'm ranting and raving now.
Oh, it's so, I don't know. It's lovely to hear in this way you're sharing. I guess we are already an hour, maybe. I have some quote here.
Gosh.
Yes, I have some quote for the end. If you don't mind, I would like to.
Yeah.
Let me see which one. So I prepared. There are two left, but I need to choose one. So the one is for the nature of thought, and the other is about the guru. Which one would you like me to read?
I don't care. You pick it. I don't care.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I will read the guru quote. Yeah. This is from the last book you've sent me, I guess.
Okay.
What was the name of the book? Just a second. Okay, never mind. The last one.
Okay.
So it goes like this. Guru barks about the cure for dogs to an audience of fleas.
Yeah. The guru barks.
Yeah. For a cure.
For a cure for dogs to an audience of fleas.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's on point. That's on point. Is the guru, if it's a guru that's trying to tell me that probably there's some money in it for the guru too, because this is a never-ending process, but that I'm supposed to be cured of these delusions, then on what basis am I going to wake up again and again and again throughout the day? And on what basis am I going to enjoy this ordinary, all its good and bad, and all its ordinary boredom and disappointment and smells and chores and failures? How are you going to cure me of these things? These things wake me up.
Oh.
So in a way, that's one way of looking at that.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah, when you say it like this, I immediately just. But when I read this one with the guru, the quote with the guru, I also felt so. There's no point to speak like this on a fleece, on an audience, please. No, no point.
Yeah, there might not be.
Yeah,
but there might be.
Who knows? Okay. Would you like to share something? Is there something new in the future? Maybe a new book? Yeah, all your books can be found in Amazon. Yes, in Amazon. Do you make any meetings or gatherings or something?
Right. I mean, I'm not happy about making Jeff Bezos even richer than he is, but my books are on Amazon. As now they're just for the most part ebooks, except a couple of small books of poetry that are just in paperback. And I just recently re-edited all the ones that are still out there, except that very last one, which was edited down to a pretty small thing. But anyway, so those books are there. It's all gibberish and nonsense, and people should probably avoid them at all costs. But the other thing that I'm doing is we have a local discussion group, a sort of we call it the Tucson Shinshu Sangha. And it's just like 4 or 5 of us on a regular basis. Well, every the first and third so Thursday now.
The information probably is on your website, if someone is.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
So there will be your website in the description on the video, so people could.
That's right, and it's a discussion group. It's based in Shinshu. It's our discussions are sort of connected to the Maida Center in Berkeley, but it's pretty free flowing, very little structure. And so so I'm writing, and then I talk with my my Sangha friends, and then I work as a laborer around my home.
Beautiful. I'm going to stop now.